Thank you so much for joining us on Let the Healing Begin podcast. I'm your host, Asia. And today we have Billy Lar on with us. How are you doing, Billy?
I'm doing well. On yourself?
I'm good, thank you. So whereabouts are you from?
I am originally from Minnesota, but these days I am in Seoul, South Korea. So I have been traveling around for the last 2 years, and Seoul has really captured my heart. This is kind of where I feel the most at home. So I've been hanging out here for most of that time while I've been traveling.
Okay, how you like it?
Yeah, I love it. I've really developed a wonderful community here through Meetup, and it's funny how that worked out. And I'm now at a point where I've been so involved in this group where I'm actually organizing events with them. And it's been a lot of fun, and there's so much to do here in Seoul, especially things that are free that you can just explore, and they really offer a lot of events. And like I said, I just feel really connected to the community here. I feel connected to the city. I grew up in a small town in Minnesota, so to get outside of that small town into a city with 20 million people, it's you can just feel the energy, and I'm an extrovert, so I like that energy of the city.
So what would you say is like has been your biggest adjustment?
Oh, it's still language. I mean, grocery. I have to go grocery shopping after this interview, and it's so stress inducing for me because everything is in Korean. I've figured out, so the Hangul alphabet, I know what the letters, how to transfer them into Roman. But I don't know, like even then, I don't know what does that word mean. So, there are things that I'm like, okay, I can recognize that and recognize that. But I just kind of buy the same food over and over and over again. And the only time that I ever really challenge myself is when I go out to eat with friends. And it's, the language barrier is very much still something that I'm adjusting to. And if I feel like if I decide to stay here long term, I absolutely positively will take Korean lessons just so that I can learn that. I actually just found out through the group that I'm part of, this meetup group that I'm part of. They're called Seoul Share. So if you ever go to Seoul, look up Seoul Share on Instagram. But anyway, there's a woman in there, and she leads a language exchange. And I just found out that she's looking for an English teacher, and wouldn't you know, I taught English for 15 years. So it's like, can we work out a trade right here? You teach me some Korean, I'll help you improve your conversational English. So looking into that opportunity for sure, especially if I decide to stay long term.
That's awesome. So let's go back to your childhood. So tell me, what was that like growing up for you?
I wouldn't say that it was anything, spectacular. I didn't have anything that was traumatic. It was just kind of a childhood, I grew up on a farm in rural Minnesota, but my sisters will immediately tell you that I did absolutely no work on the farm because I was the youngest and the only boy, so I was spoiled. I can't help that I'm the favorite child, so... But I played a lot of sports growing up, and that was my main focus, was sports, and I was very athletic and did all of that through high school, and yeah, I was someone who really enjoyed reading, and I liked history, and I don't know, I would say that I was theatrical, but I was never in theater. I was never in plays, but I just liked being a character and having a big personality and that sort of thing. And my dad is like that too. He's got a big personality. So I feel like I got a little bit of that from him. But, that was just kind of my childhood. It was, I two parents who loved me, and they didn't necessarily get along with each other. So that kind of, it added to the stress of adolescence and that sort of thing. But No, I really can't complain about my childhood. Things were good for me.
That's good. So how many sisters do you have?
I have two older sisters, and so now one lives in Redmond, Washington, and the other one lives like 500 feet away. It's interesting. It's my dad's house, and then 500 feet is my sister, and then a mile and a half is my mom's house. And my mom and my dad get along better now that they're divorced than they ever did when they were married. So we celebrate our holidays together as a family because we can do that. But as a married couple, they didn't jive.
So were you guys young when they divorced?
No, it's interesting. I feel like they waited until we were out of the house in order to get divorced, but then they just kind of continued on with it. And I think I was 25, 26 when they finally got divorced. And what's interesting is they didn't even tell me. Like, I was talking to my mom on the phone one time, and she said something along the lines of, I asked her, "What are you doing this weekend?" And she said, "Oh, I'm just moving into the house." And I'm like, "Huh? What do you mean you're moving into the what are you talking about?" And like, that's how I found out. So it's
Yeah.
it's just it just kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, but I mean, since I was like 10, 11, 12, I knew they were going to get divorced. I think I grew up in a Catholic community. So, and when you grow up in a small town, there's a lot of judgment that goes along with that. So I think that they were keeping up appearances and staying together for that amount of time, but it wasn't it wasn't doing us any favors
Yeah.
in regards to like how we saw that relationship. Like, we knew that they were on the clock.
Yeah. So when they got divorced, none of you guys were angry?
No, it was just like, it was time. It was time for them to move on and be happy separately. And I feel very grateful that the two of them get along with each other. But it's yeah, it was just time. But I personally don't have any bitterness towards either of them for getting divorced. I get, in some regards, maybe I am grateful that they waited until we were older, and I can't imagine what it would have been like to be 13, 14 years old and bouncing back and forth between my parents. And having worked in education, I know a lot of students that have to do that, and I think some of them, it develops resiliency with them, but then for others it's really, really hard. And I don't know what side of the fence I would have come out on that one. So like I said, I feel fortunate. I feel grateful and fortunate for pretty much every experience that I've had in my life. I feel very lucky.
That's really nice. So when you left, well, how old were you when you left home?
I went to college right when I was 18, 19 years old. So went to school and, did my thing there, came back home for the summers. But then when I graduated from college at 23, I moved right into my job in Rochester, Minnesota. So, 23 years old, I was on my own. And I don't know that I had the emotional maturity at that time, because I was still sort of living in a college mindset. And I think that kind of stuck with me for until I reached my 30s. And I know that as I look back on that, I lacked a lot of emotional maturity. But I was also in a mindset of, well, you can't tell me anything. So that's not a very good combination. And I made a lot of mistakes. There was a lot of entitlement that came along with that too. I'm just going to do whatever I want, da 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 da. And I look back on that. I look back on it with a lot of regret and a lot of shame, because I'm just 46-year-old Billy is embarrassed of 26-year-old Billy. And yeah, but at the same time too, you have to move on. You have to forgive yourself in those ways, and you just have to say, listen, you did develop the emotional maturity and the emotional intelligence that needed in order to move past that. And I'm often reminded of this quote from Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam. He says, you know, that person that you used to be is still in the car with you and will always be in the car with you, but under no circumstances should you allow that person to get back behind the wheel. And, you know, he's still in the car, but he's locked in the trunk now. So he doesn't ever need to come out. And I feel good about that. You know, there are moments where, I mean, we're not perfect. So, you know, I might be quick to judgment, or I'm not as curious as I could be. So it's good to kind of, you know, I have people who will say, hey, you take a step back here. Have you thought about this? It's like, oh, yeah. That's a good point. And I think that's why it's really important to surround yourself with the right community, because if you do that, then you're not gonna be in your echo chamber. You're not gonna just be in your silo. You're actually gonna get different perspectives from people who will push back on some things, and you can have a dialogue about it, and you don't have to get defensive. You might immediately get defensive. I think that's natural to immediately get defensive, but if you have the emotional maturity, which I didn't have when I was in my 20s, but if you have the emotional maturity as you grow older, then you're able to maybe see that as defensive and then say, okay, well, let me process. Why am I getting this feedback? Why am I getting this constructive criticism? And so let me think about from their perspective, what's my experience, and why have I been doing this? Why did I say this? And then you can sort of assess, like, okay, hey, wait a minute, maybe there is another way to do this. Or you can say, you know what, I respectfully disagree with what you said right there, and I'm going to move forward. But at least you're taking time to pause and consider where the other person is coming from. Not necessarily saying that you have to agree with what they say, but you're at least considering what they say. And to me, that's a big component of curiosity and emotional growth.
So at what point did you kind of realize, like, that you weren't emotionally mature? Was it something that happened that kind of woke you up, or was it like just as you began to mature and look back?
I think mostly it was actually about 10 years ago, so 2023 or 2013, excuse me, because I was really struggling with my mental health at that time. So I was having anxiety attacks, and those were manifesting into depression, and that was manifesting into suicidal ideation. And I was having these conversations with my best friend. He has his PhD in forensic neuropsychology, so not a bad friend to have. But he was saying to me, listen, these things that you're telling me, like, this is not a best friend conversation. This is a you need to talk to a therapist conversation. So I went to therapy in, it was February of 2013. And I was introduced to mindfulness by my therapist. Her name is Mindy Ben-Dixon. And developing that mindfulness practice is, I mean, I often tell people it not only changed my life, but it most likely saved it as well. Because it brought attention to the somatic experience of what anxiety felt like. And then the more that I started practicing mindfulness, the less impulsive and the less reactive I was, and the more responsive I became. And that to me has been such a huge transition. So I think in the last 10 years, I've really grown emotionally. I've grown socially. It's like I said, it was life-changing for me.
So let me ask you this. What would you say was the source of, like, your anxiety and depression?
So for me, at that time, I was working in an alternative program, and I was working with students who were coming to me with social, emotional, academic, socioeconomic challenges, barriers to their learning. So they had, they were coming in with this I hate school mentality already. So I'm somebody who, I'm pretty regimented, I'm structured, I like routine, and I like if those things are broken, I have a hard time adjusting. I have a better time adjusting now, but back then I didn't have the capacity to do that. I didn't have the mental agility to do that, the emotional agility to do that. So when they would act out, then I would get frustrated, and then I would project my frustration on them. They would project their frustration onto me. And it was just this toxic wave that would roll over us in the classroom. So I was feeling rejected in my professional life because I didn't feel like I was making connections or breaking through to the students. And then I think what really hit rock bottom for me was a string of 3 relationships. So when I was 30, I was in a 2-year relationship with someone that I would describe as emotionally abusive and manipulative. And when a year after that relationship ended, I still kind of picking up the pieces, but I was dating somebody, and she was a single mom, and we dated for a year. And after a year, she kind of said, I'm not interested in changing the dynamic between me and my young son by introducing him to the man in my life. And I'm like, oh. So that was a huge rejection. And then shortly after that, I dated somebody who, in my eyes, was just like a perfect 10 in every way. She was beautiful, she was witty, she was funny. We shared a lot of the same interests. And I was like, okay, here we go. But because I was still dealing with the rejection from work and the residuals of this emotionally abusive relationship that I never took the time to sort out, I was projecting a lot of my insecurities onto her. And then finally she just said, I don't really like the way that you make me feel, so I'm gonna leave. And I was like, wait, I wasn't aware of it. I can change. She's like, no, I'm good. Like I turned the flight switch off. I'm out. And that led to this spiral of just like desperation and shame. And that's really where, when you talk about rock bottom, that's where I really started to feel like, oh my gosh, like nobody wants me in their life. And so that's anxiety, that's depression, and then that's what manifests in the suicidal ideation. So it was like, okay, I need to get some help, because these thoughts are powerful, they are ever present, and they are doing me a disservice. Like, and I am sick, I am achy. It wasn't good. I wasn't sleeping, and you're not sleeping, then you're agitated just when you wake up. So then anything that happens is going to agitate you. So that's what was happening around me. And finally I got some help, and it was like, oh, I was able to recognize some of these patterns of thought and interrupt them, and not stop them, but to interrupt them, to create a pause and to say, oh, here's where these thoughts are coming from. So let's just let's keep them in the parking lot for right now, so to speak. And we can revisit them at another time, but we can revisit them when you're less emotionally reactive, because right now they've got you stirred up and they're not doing you any good. So let's kind of put them in the parking lot for right now. And now that you know that you're at this heightened state, how can we just kind of keep you hear for right now so that you don't continue to go up. You're not trying to shove it away, but you can keep it where it's at. And then through some of the exercises that my therapist had given me, doing some name and tame stuff, and then doing some breathing exercises, slowly lowering that level of anxiety so that I can continue moving forward and respond to whatever's going on around me rather than reacting.
So let's say we have a listener that may be having suicidal thoughts. What would you say to that person?
Well, I don't know that that's in my area of expertise. I think the first thing you need to do if you're having those thoughts is talk to someone. So that is for sure something that I would highly recommend. If you're having those kind of thoughts, you need to talk to somebody, and it should be a licensed professional of some capacity, because that's eventually what turned things around for me, and it's not going to happen overnight. So you're going to most likely be given homework. You're going to be given tools to kind of help you reshift your thoughts, but you have to actually do that stuff. But talk to a therapist. And people are like, well, therapy is expensive. BetterHelp is actually, you might find that affordable. So I used BetterHelp for about a year, and I really, really like that platform. And I found it to be affordable. And so I would highly recommend doing something like that if money is an issue. I think insurance probably works along those lines too, but just finding someone when I say someone, not a friend. Like, you can talk to friends and like, if that's the opening for it, good, but your friends they're not licensed professionals. So start talking to a licensed professional if you're having those kind of thoughts.
Thank you for that. So initially, like when you had sought out help from a therapist, was that hard for you to do, or you were just so tired that you just wanted help?
I was so tired that I just wanted help. I don't think that it was ever anything that I had ever considered, ever, until my best friend said, you need to do this. And his opinion matters to me, not just because he's my best friend, but because he has his PhD in psychology. So he's hearing what I'm saying and telling me, these are not normal thoughts. These are not normal things to say. You need to go talk to somebody about this. So it was him pushing me in that direction that got me thinking, okay, yeah. And like, I'll tell you this, like where I lived, the psychology office was literally around the corner from my building. So it took me 3 minutes to walk door to door. I don't know that I would have worked so hard to find a place to go to therapy had that not been the case. So I feel like that's why something like BetterHelp is really powerful, because you can do it from home. You can do it on your phone. Like, you could be driving around, and if you're running errands, doing it that way. So there are a bunch of different options that you could use for something like BetterHelp. But I was going in person. This is 10 years ago. You didn't have BetterHelp. So like I said, I don't know that I would have, if it wasn't so convenient, I don't know that I would have gone. But then again, had I not gone, like, who knows what would have happened.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you went too, because now you're here to share your story. That was really courageous of you. So how long did you attend therapy, like before you started to see a change in, like, the way that you thought and just like in your life?
Yeah, I went twice a month for 6 months. And I would say when it got to summer vacation around June, I started practicing mindfulness more. So I was like, well, if some is good, more is probably better. So I had more time to dedicate to practicing. So I would do multiple meditations or mindfulness practices throughout the day. And not long, like, 10 minutes, something like that. I wasn't sitting cross-legged for 45 minutes saying Om, like that kind of thing. I wasn't doing that. I couldn't sit cross-legged if I wanted to anyway. So it was just kind of stuff like that I would do that for 10 minutes. But then, even then, finding ways to become more aware of what thoughts were present. So that in and of itself becomes a mindfulness practice, because you're just kind of sitting with what is, or you're recognizing, like I was saying, the somatic experience. So that's where you feel it in your body. To me, that was one of the biggest game changers, because I was able to recognize when there was tension in my body, or for me, when I'm feeling anxiety, it's in my stomach. So whenever I can feel anxiety bubbling up in my stomach. So whenever I notice that, then it's checking in with my breath. And that was another thing that really helped me too, is paying more attention to my breathing. I mean, we breathe every day, all day, but how much time do we really pay attention to our breath? So checking in with my breath more and more and more throughout the day, even just doing that 2 to 3 minutes, that brought attention to, okay, what is it I'm experiencing right now? I'm checking in physically and I'm checking in emotionally, what is present. And doing those little check-ins kind of gave me an opportunity to say, all right, this is where I'm at right now. These are the emotions that I'm bringing into whatever I'm going to do next. And that was really, really beneficial. So much so that I think it was like October of that following school year, I had freshmen and sophomores for 2 years. So I had the same students for 2 years. One of my sophomores, who was in my freshman class, said to me, Mr. Lar, you seem like you're in a better mood this year. And that was it. Like, that was like, okay, this is so palpable that the energy that I am giving off is being received in a more positive way. Yeah. So once I heard that, then it was like, oh, okay. Well, I need to make sure that I continue on with this practice. But then one of the tenets of mindfulness is gratitude. And one of the nicest things anyone has ever said to me is, Billy, when you're excited about something, you want everybody else to be excited about it too. So I thought to myself, well, gosh, if mindfulness can help a nut job like me, there's probably other people out there who would benefit from this. So I'm going to learn as much as I can about mindfulness and how it benefits people, so that I can teach it to other people. And so now here I am, a certified mindfulness meditation teacher. And it's, to me, like I said, it's a way of bringing things full circle, because even a year after I started therapy, I had gone for 6 months, and then I'm like, I feel really good, and I have this practice and I have this routine in place. I think I'm good. And she said, I agree. She said, if anytime you need to come back in, you can just schedule it. But she said, I think you can do this. So then I think it was probably about a year later, after I'd stopped going, I just went in to Mindy and said, hey, it's been a year, but one of the tenets is gratitude. I just wanted to come in here and say thank you for saving my life. Mm-hmm. And it was just a really, really beautiful conversation. And I found out that she was retiring like in the next month. So I was like so excited and so thankful that I had that opportunity to say that to her in person.
That's awesome. Now let me ask you this, like when you made it through this and everything, and now that you're being more mindful, do you feel like you have a whole new life?
I do. I think I'm able to hit the slow down button more often. I had this really cool experience the other day where I was invited to okay, it's called the vegan tour for Korea or to Korea, right? I'm not a vegan, but whatever. They were making food. They were making food, and they invited me. I'm like, yeah, I'll go.
I know that's right.
and but it was a chef who was like a renowned temple chef, right? So it's all these Buddhist monks, and they eat vegan, and I was getting this cultural experience from the monks. But then they also encourage us to eat the same way that the monks do. And the monks eat very slowly, and they eat quietly, like they do not talk. And even when they put the bowls, you get like 4 bowls, and they're all different sizes, so then you put them all to back into with each other. But even when you do that, you do it very, very slowly, so that you do not make a sound. So the purpose behind that is everything is an intentional movement, so that you're moving slowly. You're not rushing through anything. And so I really took that to heart, and I was the last person finished eating, because they had all these very wonderful things to sample. And I grew up on a farm. I'm a meat and potatoes kind of guy. So I'm seeing all, it's this red bean rice, or this something like that. It's red paste rice that we ate, and then really fresh kimchi, and then they had these ginger slabs there, and mandarin. What else? Like water chestnuts.
Ooh.
So yeah, and it wasn't a lot to eat. It was these very small portions, but you got to. I sat in, though. I could have eaten that in 5 minutes, no problem. But it took me a half hour to eat everything. And I was very, like I said, I'm trying to eat with chopsticks too. So I'm better at chopsticks now than I was when I got here a year and a half ago. But, just kind of fumbling around with some things. But then again, trying to do it quietly, trying to do it intentionally. Normally I'm a bull in a china shop, so I'm knocking things around and slamming things, da-da-da-da-da-da. So there was this, it really forced me to slow down. And I do that from time to time. I don't eat all of my meals like that, but when I find myself shoving food in my stupid mouth because I'm just think I'm hungry, I try to slow down so that I'm like, okay, I want to appreciate this meal, especially if I go out to eat. I really want to slow down and appreciate the food, because sometimes it's, especially here in Korea, it's things that I've never had before. And like, kimchi is not kimchi everywhere. You get kimchi everywhere, but some restaurants, their kimchi is superior to other restaurants. And it's not even a nice restaurant, it's just a restaurant, but they took great care into preparing that kimchi. And so just kind of savoring the flavors. I host a podcast called The Mindful Midlife Crisis, and I had my friend Matt Hazard, he's my co-host. We talked about, he's a coffee aficionado. And I asked him, do you sit and enjoy your coffee, or do you just drink your coffee? And he said, honestly, I just drink my coffee, and I usually drink it while I'm at work. And I'm like, okay, here's your challenge then. I want you to just take 3 to 5 minutes every morning to be present with your coffee and activate all 5 senses. So before you even taste it, smell the aroma, feel the heat come off of the cup, feel the warmth of the cup in your hands. take a look at the color and whatever, you know, I don't drink coffee, but like the caramelization, whatever, you know, whatever it looks like. Take a look at it, because you put all this time and energy into your coffee, but do you really appreciate the work that it took for that coffee to get from wherever it was grown to being packaged to in your hand right now? And then when you drink it, how does that change the flavor and the texture of coffee? Yeah, as it hits and rolls around on your tongue and activates all those taste buds, you're going to experience that coffee differently. You're going to experience your food differently. And if you have the time to savor it, like I had the opportunity to do with this vegan meal, and again, I'm not vegan, this would not have been a meal that I would have prepared for myself, but I think because I had that opportunity and because I had that reminder and the presence of eating with these monks, it reminded me to slow down. And I've got a lot of energy. I'm pretty high anxiety, high intensity. I often say that I practice mindfulness so that I can be this level of obnoxious. So you know, that's kind of what I'm coming from. And I figure if people have the same energy, no, that's okay. That's okay. If people are coming from the same energy that I'm coming from, I imagine that it is difficult to come from or go from the red or the orange and to slow down and maybe even just be in the yellow. I mean, some people are very natural just being in the green and the blue, right? That doesn't come naturally to me. I usually run, you know, pretty orange, and it's very easy for me to get into the red. I have to be intentional to get into the yellow. Yeah. And I have to be mindful to get into the yellow. And if I get into the green zone, that's bonus points for me right there. It's just like, oh wow, this feels really good. Yeah. Very rarely am I ever there. I'm usually like da 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 da. But like I said, that's why I practice mindfulness, because if I didn't, I would just be so out of control. So for me, it just levels me out a little bit, and it lets people tolerate me a little bit longer.
So what would you say is your biggest or number one, like, or your key mindfulness tip?
Yeah, people will say, well, I'm not going to sit and meditate. Meditate's boring. Agreed. Meditating is boring. I still do it, you know, at least 10 minutes a day. I know people that do it for 40 minutes a day, and I'm like, in one sitting. Like, they do it in one sitting. I think that something simple like sitting with your coffee is a really easy way to start your day. If you're someone who commutes and you drive, before you get out of your car, go ahead and turn it off. But before you get out, take 10 intentional breaths where you just feel your breath and try and breathe through your nose and through your nose, and filling your belly with air. And in doing so, you're just simply being present with whatever is there and bringing awareness to whatever you're feeling, whether it's emotionally or physically. What are you present with? And letting go of any note or any tendency to judge what you're doing. Letting go of judgment and just being present with that breath and feeling that. That's 10 breaths. And if you can do that multiple times throughout the day, what you're going to find is that you're activating your prefrontal cortex, which is what regulates emotion. But not only that, but you are cooling and shrinking the amygdala, which is the fight, flight, or fright response. That's our animal brain. So that's what causes us to react when we are hit with stimuli. The prefrontal cortex is what allows us to respond. The prefrontal cortex is what creates that space between stimulus and behavior. When we don't practice mindfulness, we go from stimulus to reaction. When we do practice mindfulness, we go from stimulus to mindfulness to choice to action. So we're just creating that space, and it slows things down. It still happens very quickly, but it does slow things down in the brain because the brain is highly efficient. And the more you practice that the more automatic it becomes. So just finding little moments throughout the day to just be present with your breath, to just simply be present with what is, and going from doing mode to being mode. And that might sound self-indulgent or lazy, but really it's necessary. It's absolutely necessary, because if we just go without checking in, that's when we get burnt out. That's when we're exhausted. And that's when we are bringing home a lot of this emotional baggage. And the way that we then interact with our family when we get home, it might be a byproduct of that. So even when you get home, then before you get out of the car, you just sit in the car for those 10 breaths, and you are aware of where you're feeling your breath and what is present within you emotionally, physically, so that you know how to respond once you walk through the door and see whatever is in front of you. You're able to take in the stimuli and respond to it as opposed to react to it.
You know, I love that. I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that every day before my son gets out of school. You know what? So God's bringing something back to my remembrance, like, you know, like with your whole experience of going through like depression and anxiety and how you took your experience and now you are a certified mindfulness coach. Like sometimes when we have to go through these things, like it can seem pretty dark, you know, it is very dark and just hard, you know, it's just a really rough, rainy season in our lives sometimes. But like the fact that you made it through, you got the help that you needed, and you did the work that you needed to do. Now you're able to operate in that, you know, calling to connect with people, because you know how it feels, you know, to go through that season. Like, you know how real it is. Like years ago, I went through postpartum depression, like after I had my son. It was about 6 months after I had my son, but like I had heard of depression and I didn't really, you know, I never did research or anything on it. But until like I started experiencing that myself, like prior to that, I didn't realize how real depression was. You know, it's a lifestyle, you know, and it's very hard to get out of. And it's hard to explain to someone who's never experienced it or has never like gone through that, you know. But once I had gone through that, I'm like, oh my goodness, this, you know, this is no joke. This is a monster. This is an animal, you know. So, you know, now that you're able to understand where people are going, like coming from and what they're going through, do you feel like you're better to, like, you're more able to connect with the people that you work with?
Yeah, I think that I'm less judgmental and that I'm a bit more patient with it. I still have a tendency to want to fix things, right? So I have to stop myself and almost even just ask people, are you sharing this with me, or do you want some strategies around this? Because I know I hate when people give me unsolicited advice. So I try not to do that, but I find that sometimes if I'm having conversations with people, that I will then try to fix whatever they have going on. So I've tried to hit the pause button on that and just say, you know, tell me more, and it just ask questions, and then be continuing to be curious about it, and then say, do you want any suggestions? Do you want any strategies on how to navigate this? And for me, that's just kind of in conversation. When people are working with me as a coach, I assume that they do want strategies around that sort of thing. But I also have to be mindful of, hey, am I listening to the big picture here? Am I missing some things? What dots am I not connecting? Because I also think too that it's easy to connect their experience to my experience, but my experience is not their experience. So I can say, well, here's some things that work for me. These might help you. If they don't, let's go back to the drawing board. I'll take a look at some, I'll do some more research, see based on some of the things you said, here are some other things that you could do. So I think just in general, I feel like I'm a bit more empathetic than what I was originally. Because I think too, just kind of going back to that idea of not knowing, I think some people, though they would benefit from having a coach or having a therapist, we just are under the assumption that, well, we're adults, so we should be able to figure it out. And I think I think it's Jeff Goodrich I was having this conversation with. He's a coach. He credits his dog Dude, or no, it's Duder. He credits his dog Duder for helping him change his life around. But he and I were having this conversation where he said, I played baseball my whole life, he said, and I had I had a t-ball coach, I had a little league coach, I had a high school coach, I had a college baseball coach. And then when I graduated from college, I was just expected to know how to do life. And I think, I remember, because I think sometimes that term life coach, people sort of look down on that. And I remember telling somebody that, I'm looking into doing that. And they're like, why would someone need a life coach? Shouldn't you just have it figured out? And it's like, no, like in the words of one of my guests, Dr. Sri Walker, life be lifing sometimes. And it's just like, yeah, I've never been through these situations before. So like, who do I turn to for help? I could turn to my friends, but they've got things going on too.
Yeah. So
am I burdening them with what I have going on? So sometimes working with a coach or working with a therapist, yeah, it's expensive sometimes, but it's also worth the investment long term, because how much longer are you willing to continue living that way? And I think that's, you can say, all right, I'm giving myself until this time to figure this out on my own. But in the meantime, I'm maybe just going to set aside a little bit of money so that I have this, just in case when we get to this point, like I haven't figured it out. Okay, now I'm taking this money and investing in myself because I'm worth it. I'm worth it. And I'm tired of not knowing how to handle these situations. I'm tired of feeling these emotions and not knowing how to come to grips with them. So I want to pay somebody to help me navigate those emotions. And like, I honestly don't care if it's a life coach or if it's a business coach or if it's a therapist. Working with somebody, it's good that people have personal trainers. So look at it in that way, that you are investing in yourself in some capacity. And it's not that you need 7 different coaches. You might just need the one right coach, and that unlocks everything else. So you might find that, gosh, if I work with a therapist, I'm able to sort out these emotions that are within me. And now that I've kind of cleared out some space there, I feel pretty good. I've got a little bit more energy. Maybe I will go for that walk. And then you go for that walk, and then you're like, gosh, I've got a little bit more energy. Maybe I will get that gym membership. And then it's like, gosh, I feel so good. I don't know that I need a therapist anymore, but I wouldn't mind working with this personal trainer right here. Let's do it. And again, it's just a continued investment in yourself.
You know what? And some people like have this fear of being judged, like if they do get with a life coach or a therapist, or and it's like, me personally, I feel like, who makes the rules, like who makes these rules, if a life coach is what you need or a therapist is what you need, like get what it is that you need out of this life. We're not promised tomorrow, and life is so short. So like you said, invest in yourself while you have the capability. It's going to be worth it in the long run. Like, one thing that God has shown me is like really to put myself first, up over like trying to accommodate others. Like, invest in myself, in my health, in my emotional health, my mental health, just in myself as a person all the way around, and then everything else will follow, you know.
Well, and I think about too these people who say, I got here all on my own. No, you didn't.
Right.
When you say you got here all on your own, you sound completely unaware and ungrateful of everybody who helped you along the way. Do you have the same number of people who helped you along the way? No. And that I understand. Some people do not have the family support that other people have. And I think that's where a lot of the I did this all on my own, where that comes from. And I understand that. But somewhere along the way, someone gave you an opportunity or saw something in you. It could have been as simple as you're hired to work at McDonald's.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then that job led to the skills and the transferable experiences that you have in this next phase, and then in this next phase, because then someone gave you an opportunity there. So somebody saw something in you, or it was just, they were like, yeah, we need to fill this position. But then it led to something more. So if you are one of those I got here all on my own people, I would encourage you to take a pause and just look back and think about, how did you get to where you are now? And especially if you feel successful. I also think too that people who say I got here all on my own, you're not where you want to be. So I feel like that isn't where you want to be, and you're upset about it. Like you're not satisfied with where you want to be. I got here all on my own. Well, then you got no one to blame but yourself, right? So take a step back, and who did you blow off? Who were the people who were maybe the teachers in your life, or who were the family members who did reach out to you, or the friends who tried to encourage you to move in a different direction, and then reach back out to them and say, you know what? I'm not where I want to be. And I remember you saying this thing to me a while back. And so I'd like to continue having that. Takes humility to do that, because you have to then acknowledge that you're holding yourself accountable for where you are in this life. So, like I said, if you're one of those people, take a pause from thinking that, and look back. Okay, how did I get here? And if I'm especially not where I want to be, then who in my life, who have I surrounded myself with? Have I surrounded myself with the right people? And is that why I don't think anyone has helped me get to where I am today? Because maybe the people along the way weren't very helpful. And then we can have a conversation around, okay, there's a community for you that can help you get to where you want to go. So let's find that community. I'm in Seoul because of a community that I randomly found on Meetup. We were just going to go for a hike, and it turned into a life-changing experience that brings me back here. So there's a community out there for you that is going to enrich your life. There's a community out there that could very well drag you into that, or drag you into more of what you want less of. So be mindful of that too. Be careful of that too. And you know, I mean, you know what that is. You know what kind of life you want and what you don't want. And it doesn't mean compromising your identity or your integrity of who you are. It just means shifting your priorities and moving towards an area where you can get more of what you want.
Absolutely. And you know what? That's something good that you said, like about not shifting your identity and stuff like that. Like if you have to do that to be in a community of people, like that's the wrong community to be in, you know? Because the community that's meant for you is going to complement who you are to your core, you know, the authentic version of you. And then also too, like it was something else that you mentioned, like about being humble and humility. Like that's very important in every aspect, you know. And not forgetting about the people that have helped you along the way, because just because it's not family or close friends or something like that, you know, like God sends, you know, it could be some random person, you know, think about all the days that we are having, you know, like let's say it's a rough day and that person at the store, you know, may have gave you a few words of encouragement that helped you along through that day, you know. So it's good not to forget those people. The help may not have come the way that you wanted it to, you know. And also too, like it's good to remember that, you know, like some people want to be carried, you know, to where they're trying to go to, and it doesn't work like that. You know, we have to be, number one, intentional and mindful, you know, and do the work ourselves, you know. But you know, let's not forget about the people that may have came in and done this little deed here or that little deed there, or you know, gave some information word of mouth that helps you go fill out this application, and now you have this job, or like you mentioned, a job that hired you, you know, because they did open the door. You know, God opened that door, and now you're working and you're gaining customer service skills or whatever it may be, you know, to be aligned with your next, you know, destination. And that's what this journey is about. It doesn't all come at once, you know. It's about the experiences, it's about the learning curves, the lessons, you know, all that stuff. But we have to learn something in each season that we're in, you know, and always remain humble, even as we make it up higher. You know, it's so important.
And, you know, even getting that job at McDonald's or getting that entry level position, it's probably not going to be a party. So it's not going to be, you might not feel like it's meaningful because it's like, I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over again. But thinking about, okay, what skills am I learning here? And you don't have to do that every day. Like, that's not realistic, but maybe you do that once a week and you just say, all right, let me look back on my week here and maybe there are just things that you do automatically, what have you, but was there a customer interaction that you had? Was there a coworker interaction that you had that you navigated well, or that you didn't navigate well? And if you did navigate it well, how did you navigate it well? If you didn't navigate it well, what might be a better way to approach it in the future? Is it something that you need to resolve with that colleague? You can do those things as a 16, 17, 18-year-old working some entry-level position. So just finding little ways like that to grow. I mean, if you're doing that now as a teenager, you are going to be so far ahead of the people around you in that, you know, in that same age group. And people are going to take notice. I get, you know, I worked in education for 20 something years, so I know that throwing stuff on your college resume is important, but in my opinion, EQ over IQ any day of the week. I will take somebody who maybe is a B minus C plus student, but who is really, really nice and really, really committed to working hard and figuring things out. It might take them a while, but working with them is such a pleasure. I'll take that person 100 times out of 100 over than the A plus student who is just rude and condescending
Yeah.
and thinks their poop doesn't stink. I for sure, I would rather work with that other person. So and I think that's where that emotional intelligence really, really benefits somebody in the long run. You're just going to have better relationships moving forward.
Absolutely. And let me say this one thing for the listeners, like, not to like say anything bad about anybody that may be employed with McDonald's or any other like restaurant or anything like that, because a job is a job, like, you know, just like it's a blessing and all. I do appreciate that though. So let me ask you one last thing. If people want to work with you, how do they find you?
Yeah, the easiest entryway is to join our Meditate and Mingle community. So people can go to www.mindfulmidlifecrisis.com, and up at the top, you can join our Meditate and Mingle sessions. They're an hour long. We do just like kind of quick check-in, and it's like a 10 to 15 minute practice where it's a guided practice where I lead people through, and then we have a discussion about, hey, what came up for you during this practice, and how can we use what we discussed here in this practice moving forward? How can you apply it moving forward? And I have people from all over the world. I have some people from the United States. I have some people from Korea. I have some people from Singapore who join. So you kind of get these different perspectives from the different cultural experiences. So it's a really great entry-level way to be introduced to a mindfulness practice. And I try, like kind of in the same way that we discussed here, I try to help people find ways that they can practically implement mindful moments throughout the day. Because I understand, like, you know, hey, maybe in your mind, you can't find 10, 15 minutes to sit with a meditation. Okay. But are there ways where you can find 3 to 5 multiple times throughout the day? Absolutely. I believe that you can. So that's an easy way for people to connect with me. You can find me on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. You can check out my travels there. I have some other tools and resources that people can access there as well. Check out the Mindful Midlife Crisis podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Take a listen. That is actually coming to an end here soon. So I won't be doing any new episodes, but I have over 100 episodes that are available to you. You can go to www.mindfulmidlifecrisis.com, click on podcasts, and then fan faves. And there's a list of our fan faves right there. So if you're overwhelmed by the options that are there, just go to the ones that people enjoy listening to the most, and then you can rummage around in there a little bit more. And if you're like, I actually really would like to have a conversation with this guy, if you go to the website, you can click on schedule an exploration call, and we can chat about what it might look like to be more intentional and mindful moving forward in your life.
Thank you. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it too. Thank you so much. This was fun because, like, usually I kind of get asked the same question. So it was interesting to have to dive back into my youth and then just kind of the progression up to, you know, what it was in 2013 that led me to where I am today. So thank you for that walk down memory lane.
No problem. Thank you for exploring with us. And thank you everyone that tuned in and listened or either watched here on the Healing Media podcast. A couple ways that you can support the show. You can like and subscribe and follow us on other social media platforms. You can also head over to www.greatergrowthllc.com, purchase a t-shirt or a sweatshirt from the store. You can also head on over to Amazon and purchase a copy of Back in My Day. And then one last thing, you can also check out the link tree that's tagged on the bottom of this, and check out all the services that we have to offer. We are now offering mentoring and also a life skills program. Thank you so much, and until next time.